What if giants was the wrong translation? What if the Jotnar were never meant to be slain but contained? Because they didn't disappear, they withdrew. And the ancient texts leave a trail, hiding in plain sight. In this video we'll follow it, all the way to the edge of the world, where the Jotnar still feel close. Now listen, people talk about the Jotnar like they went extinct, like they lost and vanished. But myths almost never end that way. Myths don't erase a thing. They move it. They push it into the dark and call it gone. So, here's the claim. The one most retellings avoid. The Jotnar never disappeared. They withdrew from the world we live in and stayed in the places we rarely dare to stand. When most people hear giants, they picture height, big bodies, footsteps shaking the ground. But the Old North wasn't obsessed with size. It was obsessed with force. The Jotnar show up as winter that doesn't care, stone that doesn't move, wind that doesn't negotiate. And here's the part that always stops me. In the stories, the gods don't treat them like animals. They bargain. They trick. They marry into them. They trade with them. That's not how you deal with a monster. That's how you deal with a rival, or a power you can't simply destroy. So if they were just big brutes, why does the myth keep treating them like a civilization? Most retellings make it sound clean. Order versus chaos. Gods win. The world becomes safe, but the original vibe is messier, because the war never truly ends. It loops, the cold returns. The sea changes. The wild pushes back. And the Jotnar are always placed in the same spot, not at the center of the kingdom, at the edge, where maps fade out, where roads stop, where firelight feels small. That's not an accident. That's a message. You can build a home, but you can't build a world. Nature agrees to forever. Here's the pattern I can't unsee. Boundaries, coastlines, where land becomes ocean. Tree lines, where forest becomes tundra. Mountain passes, where fine becomes fatal. In the mythic mindset, boundaries are charged. They're where reality gets thin. That's why so many encounters happen in fog, in storms, in blizzards, because those conditions don't just hide shapes, they manufacture them. Your brain starts doing survival math, fast, messy, and it looks for agency, not the weather is dangerous, but something is here. Give that feeling a name, and you've basically summoned a being. That being is Jotnar logic, not a creature you meet, but a limit you cross. Picture a hunter in the far north, or a sailor, on black water, no lights, no help, no second chance. In that situation, your senses get weird, distances stretch, sound bends, wind makes voices, out of nothing. And your mind does what it's designed to do. It turns pressure into presence. A ridgeline becomes a watcher. A crack in the ice becomes its footsteps. A shadow becomes a decision you have to make, right now. That's why the stories repeat the same feeling, not I saw a giant, more like the air got heavy, the silence felt intentional, like the landscape leaned closer. That's not proof of a creature, but it is proof of an experience that hits humans the same way, again and again. Now zoom out. Early humans lived inside the wild, so the wild felt everywhere. It had a face, a name, a temper. Then people built. They cleared forests, mapped coasts, stacked laws, on top of land. The wild didn't vanish. It concentrated. It pulled back into the harshest places. The deep water, the cliffs, the ice fields, the weather. That turns on you mid-sentence, and once you stop meeting it daily, it becomes myth. Not because it's fake, because it's farther away. Withdrawal isn't extinction. It's when something stops meeting us, without ever stopping. Withdrawal is distance, plus time, plus human arrogance. If the Jotnar withdrew, they wouldn't leave bones, they'd leave warnings. And that's exactly what you find. Rules that sound superstitious, until you realize they're survival manuals. Don't camp there. Don't cross that pass after first snow. Don't follow lights on the water. Don't whistle at night. Near the shore. Is it mystical? Maybe. Is it practical? Absolutely. Myths do something clever. Humans ignore facts, but humans listen to fear. So the story puts teeth on the warning. It turns "be careful" into a living presence. The Jotnar survive as a cultural alarm system, not a species, a signal. The myth survives because it still does its job. This is where the giant misunderstanding matters most. In the sagas, Jotnar don't always look like towering humanoids. Sometimes they're beautiful, sometimes they're ancient, sometimes they're barely described at all. Sometimes they feel like weather, wearing a face. That isn't a plot hole. That's the myth, adapting. When a culture grows up, it stops needing a literal monster. It needs a symbol that can move. So the Jotnar become the stranger you meet in a storm, the silhouette on a ridgeline that doesn't shift, the figure in snowfall that stands too still, too patient. Not because there has to be a giant standing there, but because the environment is speaking, and the human mind translates it into a story it can carry. Here's the twist. That makes the old myths feel sharp. What if the gods didn't defeat the Jotnar? What if they negotiated? Think about the world the stories describe. The gods claim the center, homes, harvests, rules, walls. But the Jotnar keep the edges, storms, winter, deep water, mountain death, a split jurisdiction, a treaty, written in geography. And that explains why the myths never erase them. Because nature isn't something you finish. Nature is something you manage. Until you forget. And then it reminds you. That's why the final prophecy is never, "and the giants are gone." It's always, "they return." So when you hear, "the Jotnar withdrew from the world," don't picture a hidden door. Picture a line, moving, tree lines, shifting, coastlines, changing, winters arriving, like they remember your name. The Jotnar aren't a forgotten creature. They're a relationship between humans, and everything humans can't fully tame. That's why they're still here, not as giants stomping through villages, but as the cold. That turns your breath into a warning. As the fog, that makes the ocean feel endless. As the mountain, that doesn't care how brave you feel. And next time, we go deeper, because there's a reason the gods feared them. Not for their size, for what they represent, and what happens when they stop withdrawing. Because the moment nature stops backing away, myths start looking like headlines.